Hello and welcome to IGPP Expert Talks. I'm Heena Goswami, Editorial Consultant with IGPP, Institute for Governance, Policies and Politics, New Delhi. On November 5th, 2024, the US citizens will elect their next president. The election in US has raised considerable excitement among Indian audience as well, and hence IGPP has begun an educational series to introduce the audience to the various facets of the electoral procedure in the US and reflect upon the various issues that are important to the American voters, which in turn would acquaint the audience with the social and cultural complexities of the nation. The program would further reflect upon the consequences of the voters' choice upon the larger world with particular focus on India, and highlight the role played by the Indian and other diaspora communities in the US elections. The Indian American community, a rapidly growing and economically prosperous immigrant group in the United States, has become an influential factor in the upcoming 2024 US presidential election. Both the Democratic and Republican parties recognize the significance of this demographic, particularly in key battleground states where the Indian American vote could prove decisive. With a population of approximately 5.1 million, Indian Americans represent the second largest immigrant group in the US, following Mexican Americans. This community is concentrated in politically influential states like California, Texas, New Jersey, and New York. However, it is their presence in swing states such as Florida, Pennsylvania, and Georgia that has both parties keenly focused on courting their vote. Historically, Indian Americans have tended to favor the Democratic Party, drawn by shared values on issues such as immigration, healthcare, and education. This alignment was evident in 2020 presidential election, where an estimated 65 to 70% of Indian American voters supported Joe Biden, according to a 2020 AAPI survey. However, the political leanings of the Indian diaspora are not monolithic. Younger Indian Americans and business owners, in particular, are increasingly attracted to the GOP's economic policies, tax reforms, and its approach to US-India relations. The Indian diaspora in the US, which makes up about 1.5% of the country's population, has made an indelible mark on American society. Despite their small percentage, Indian Americans have a significant economic presence, with an average household income nearly double the national median. This financial success is mirrored in the remarkable achievements of notable leaders like Satya Nadella, CEO of Microsoft, and Kamala Harris, the first woman of Indian descent to be the presidential nominee of the United States. The contributions extend beyond leadership in business and politics, with icons like Mindy Kaling and Vikas Khanna enriching American culture through television, film, and cuisine. As the 2024 election draws closer, several key issues are expected to shape the voting preference of Indian Americans. Immigration remains a central concern, particularly regarding H-1B visa reforms and family reunification policies. The H-1B visa program, which allows US companies to employ foreign workers in specialty occupation, has been a vital pathway for many Indian professionals to enter the United States. Any reform to this program could significantly impact the Indian American community, making immigration policy a critical issue for candidates to address. Foreign policy, particularly US-India relations, is another crucial area of interest for Indian American voters. The geopolitical landscape in Asia has become increasingly complex, with rising tensions between China and India and broader strategic concerns in the Indo-Pacific region. Indian Americans are likely to scrutinize the candidates' policies towards India, especially in terms of trade, defense cooperation, and strategic partnerships. Indian Americans are not just concerned voters, they are increasingly active participants in the political process. The 2020 election saw a higher voter turnout among Indian Americans than in previous elections, reflecting a growing engagement with American politics. Several organizations, such as the Indian American Impact, the US India Political Action Committee, and the Hindu American Foundation, have been at the forefront of mobilizing this community. These organizations work to increase voter registration, raise awareness of key issues, and encourage turnout at the polls. The influence of Indian Americans in the US politics is notable, with several individuals making significant contributions. Kamala Harris, the Democratic presidential nominee, exemplifies this impact with her Indian and Jamaican heritage. Nikki Haley, a Republican, served as US Ambassador to the UN and a Governor of South Carolina, advocating for international diplomacy and state-level reforms. Ro Khanna, representing California's 17th District, has focused on technology and economic policies, championing progressive causes. Pramila Jayapal, representing Washington's 7th District, has been a leading voice on healthcare and immigration reform. Raja Krishnamurthy, serving Illinois's 8th District, emphasizes economic and national security issues. As the 2024 election approaches, both parties are expected to ramp up their outreach efforts to the Indian American community. The Democratic Party has historically emphasized diversity and inclusion in its platforms, and it is likely to continue appealing to the progressive base among Indian Americans. This approach may include addressing issues such as immigration reform, healthcare access, and civil rights, all of which resonate strongly with the Indian American electorate. On the other hand, the Republican Party is focusing on issues like law and order, economic policies, and its ties with the current Indian government to appeal to more conservative Indian American voters. The GOP's outreach efforts may include targeted digital campaigns, town halls, and community events, with an emphasis on languages spoken within the Indian American community, such as Hindi, Gujarati, and Tamil. The potential impact of the Indian American vote in swing states cannot be underestimated. In states like Georgia, Pennsylvania, and Florida, where the margin of victory can be razor thin, the Indian American vote could prove decisive. This was evident in 2020 election, where Indian Americans played a role in the Democratic wins in Georgia and Arizona, two states that had traditionally leaned Republican. The engagement of Indian American voters in 2024 could similarly tip the scales in closely contested states, making them a crucial demographic for both parties to win over. The 2024 US presidential election is shaping up to be one where the Indian diaspora could emerge as a critical voting bloc. Both the Democratic and Republican parties recognize the importance of addressing this community's diverse concerns to secure their support. As Indian Americans grow in influence and prominence in American society, their impact on the election is set to expand, making it essential for both parties to navigate the complex and evolving priorities of this community. With a population that is affluent and politically engaged, Indian Americans are poised to play a key role in determining the outcome of the election, especially in key battleground states. There has been much excitement in India about the upcoming US presidential election. And not just because US is an important ally of India, but also because the American political landscape is scattered with success stories of Indian diaspora who have made the US not just their homeland, but are also important players in deciding the future of the nation. To shed more light on the success of Indian diaspora in the US and the important role they are playing in the American politics, we are joined today by Ms. Simran Sodhi. Ms. Simran Sodhi is a Delhi-based journalist and foreign affairs analyst, author of Piercing the Heart, The Untold Stories of 2611. She is executive editor of NRI Focus and a regular analyst on All India radio programs on foreign affairs. Welcome to IGPP Expert Talks, ma'am.
Thanks, Heena, for having me.
So, we know that since time immemorial, Indians have traveled and settled in various parts of the globe, and they have made their mark wherever they settled. But in the modern age, we see that US became an attractive destination for the Indian diaspora, and Indians have a lot of influence on the American culture, politics, society. When did the US first starting the Indian diaspora in a major way? Like, what were some of the pull factors, and was the US always warm in their reception to Indians?
So, the Indian diaspora increasing in size in the US is a relatively recent phenomena. Since 1965, that's the time we can say that this actually started, because till 65, the US had a law which decided the immigration in the US would be based on the country of origin, so that there was a quota, and that primarily meant that there was more migration happening in the US from the European nations. So 65, the US Congress did away with this, and that's when we start seeing migration from non-European nations. So that is the kind of time we look at the timeline that Indians started going abroad. But again, if you cut another 20, 30 years, I think you see, one would see since 2000 that the Indian diaspora has become more vocal as far as the political landscape is concerned. And I think there's a reason for that. See, the first wave of migrations, the first immigrants who went, for example, if we look at some of the candidates now, Kamala Harris's mother, these are people who went there primarily to study. They were highly educated people. They went there for their masters or their PhD. They were people who were into research. So they were professionals who were going there either for higher education, research, or doing such jobs. So the political part comes with the second or the third generation. And to your question, that has the US always been very warm? Well, I think the honest answer is a mixed one. The US, well, yes, is a land of, at the end of the day, everyone's an immigrant there, right? Whether you've come from the UK or you've come from Italy or you've come from India. But there is a distinction between the migration that has taken place from Europe and the migration that has taken place from Asia. And the Asian migration is a more recent phenomenon. And I think it will take a little while before the Asians feel that much at home as Europeans do.
The Indian diaspora in US has also been sometimes referred to as the model minority. And is that an assessment that you would agree with? Obviously, one of the reasons is like their high net worth and also little tendency to cause trouble. Uh, but is that true? And also, like every other stereotype, are there pitfalls to this stereotype as well?
See, I think the reason why it's called the model minority is that the numbers of Indians is still not too much. I think we are 4.5 or 5 million even today. So that's not a very big number. But the Indian community there is well to do. So again, going back to what I said earlier, these are people who are well educated, they earn well. And if we look at the list of the Indian origin CEOs, we find that some of the US and the global companies, we take Google, we take Microsoft, Starbucks today, everyone is an Indian origin CEO. So in that sense, yes, it's a model for anyone that see these people have come here, they worked hard, and today, you are the CEO of Starbucks. So that ways, yes, it is a model thing. But then there are other stereotypes which do kick in, positive, negative, that they are from Asia, and there are other factors. So nothing is really always ideal or perfect. But yes, in that narrow sense, it is in a way modern.
In this election, we have seen that there has been a lot of attention on individuals of Indian descent during this election at the moment, and also in the primaries that led to this contest, be it Nikki Haley, Vivek Ramaswamy, uh, now JD Vance's wife Usha Vance, or the Democratic presidential nominee Kamala Harris. But compared to the numbers they have, is the Indian diaspora community sort of punching above their weight, like in the amount of political representation that they seek? And is there enough support for their vision, for the kind of vision they espouse, like Vivek Ramaswamy or Kamala Harris? How has this support come about, and what has contributed to their success story in the political arena?
See, I personally, if you take my perspective, I think, see, none of these people have actually gone up politically just by banking on their Indian roots. For example, if we look at Kamala Harris, of course, her mother went from India and her roots are Indian. She's half Indian and half Jamaican. That's the way if we look at it. But politically, as she has grown stronger, she has chosen to identify herself more as a black woman, as an African American woman, and not so much as an Indian American woman. Yes, she doesn't deny it, right? But she also doesn't emphasize it that much. That is because politically, the votes that will come her way, if we compare the number of Indian voters and the African American voters, the African American voters are huge. So for her, politically, it makes sense uh, not to be cast as an Indian American, but it makes more sense to be cast as an African American, which also is correct because her father came from Jamaica and she does have those roots. So I think once into politics, people will pick up identities which benefit them more in the long run. If we go on the other side of the spectrum and we look at Nikki Haley, for example, right? Nikki Haley is from the different party, Republican. Her parents also migrated from India. Her father, I think, did a PhD in Canada and then he moved to South Carolina, where she eventually became the governor. But Nikki Haley also, she converted to Christianity later, even though her religion is Sikh. Her father wore a turban all his life. And there's been a fair critique of her that her late decision to change religions was more political than anything else. And I think there could be a basis of truth for that. So I think what I'm trying to say is that as politically as you get active, and politically if you have that ambition, in the US, you would not want to be seen as just being an Indian American. You would rather bank on identities which are politically more beneficial. For Kamala Harris, it is definitely being African American. And there's another point, she's been vice president, but she's never visited India. So if the Indian part of her heritage was so important to her, I think one visit should have been there. And Nikki Haley also, at the end of the day, I think she plays up to her being from South Carolina, to her being an American. And I think the identities change. That's my sense of how I look at all of them.
How about Vivek Ramaswamy then?
Vivek Ramaswamy is a very interesting character. He's a very colorful character, and he's very different from what we expect Indians to be. And he made a lot of money through his own investments, the pharma investments. So he's a self-made rich man, and he decided to jump into the presidency. And his views are a little controversial, or let me say, his views are a little surprising given that he has Indian parents. He's anti-abortion. He has been very pro-right. He is supportive of Trump. So I would say someone like Vivek Ramaswamy is an interesting character. His ideas have been controversial, have been interesting to watch, but Vivek Ramaswamy was never a serious contender for the presidential election. So he was there in the race. Now he's backed Trump, and I think that is as far as he logically thought he could go. That serious bid for presidency, I don't think was ever within his reach. That's Kamala, and maybe I feel. Let me stick my neck out and say maybe the next time we have the US elections, we might see Nikki Haley coming forward, even though this time she has conceded defeat in favor of Trump. So these are the people who are really pushing the bill.
She was also the only challenger left to Donald Trump later in the primaries. Uh, so these are all success stories. But recently we also see like there has been an increase in attacks on Indian students, Indian American student, right of Christian right-wing groups in the US with their anti-immigration policies. Do you think that should be a cause of concern for the Indian diaspora? And is it also a reflection of the resentment that maybe the white population of the US feels against the success stories of like Indian diaspora there?
I think it is a cause of concern because I think, no society is perfect. Every society has its positives and its negatives. And I think one of the negatives that we are seeing in the US society is this rising attacks on Indians, on specifically, by people who think Indians come here and they steal our jobs. So that is to be objected to, and that is something one hopes that whoever becomes the next president, whether it is Kamala Harris or it is Trump, it is a hope that they would address them, right? So this is hate crimes which should not be tolerated in any society. But I also feel that, um, you know, sitting here, one looks at the US as a land of opportunity, which it is. I mean, no one can deny that it's a great country which gives people a lot of opportunity to grow, to go to some of the best schools. But there are underlying problems of, race politics, identity politics. And even if sometimes we are a little reluctant to discuss all this, the fact of the matter is it does exist. And that is something one has to address, because with time, the number of Indian immigrants in the US is likely to grow. They are likely to be even doing better, earn better. So when you're earning better, you're also becoming a source of envy. And maybe we will see more political participation from Indians there, but we will also see more hate crimes. We will also see more stereotypes, as you put it. We will also see more calling out that maybe, they're not American enough. So all that will have to be addressed by the American society.
We have had experts who did agree with this assertion and said that if there's a big divide in the American society, it is that of race. And if that is, they were speaking in terms of black versus white, but if there are other groups adding to that divide, then obviously the divide is only going to deepen if there's not, substantial intervention by the political class. There was also interesting phenomena that happened that we saw during, not so much during Biden's tenure, but during Trump's tenure, when there was a bonhomie between the leaders from India, Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Donald Trump. And there was also sort of convergence of right-wing ideologies, it seems. And the Indian Prime Minister did reach out to the Indian diaspora in the US. The US president came here and held a rally. Do you think that if the Harris presidency were to happen, that wouldn't continue as much, because Kamala Harris is said to be closer to the group of liberal Democrats in her party, who have, at many instances, they have criticized India's, specifically Prime Minister Narendra Modi's, its government's policy on minorities, or sort of the organizations like the hyper Hindu nationalism ideology.
See, I think I would divide this into two parts. One, I would say that the way any nation does its foreign policy, and I think India would do it similarly. So if you tomorrow have Donald Trump as president or you have Kamala Harris as president, India is going to try and make an effort to make it a working relationship with either of them, because we are today very deeply invested in a lot of things in the US. The last 10 years of the Narendra Modi government has also seen a lot of coming together of India-US interests, right? So we are a part of Quad with the US. We are a part of their equations when it comes to security of the Indo-Pacific. So I think it would not be possible for either India or the US at this point, just because you maybe don't like the person who's in the office. So this working relationship will continue, and I think for India, the pragmatic thing is they will work, Trump or Harris. The second part, I would agree with you. I think you see Trump, and that's what makes Trump again very interesting. I think Trump has this. He's a bit of a Texan cowboy, right? He'll come and he'll say, "Oh, I think climate change is a hoax." He's capable of saying all that. And he also is one president who has never shied, or was one president who never shied away from saying that it is not the US which will go out and kind of act as the global policeman, which is something the US has prided itself on doing for many decades. So I think for India, it might be a little might be easier if Trump is there, because Trump is not going to preach or talk about human rights and minority issues. If we get Kamala Harris as president, and you're right, she's much closer to the liberals in the party, I think she will keep that working relationship going, but she will also make it a point, maybe not publicly, maybe behind closed doors, but I think we will then expect her and her administration to be more vocal on human rights, on the issue of minorities in India and the right wing. So I think they are likely to be a little more critical of India in those aspects, which I think a Trump administration will not be. But I think India will work with either of them. Kamala will just be a little more, she'll be a little more tough to work with.
And that brings me to like an interesting phenomena that we are very excited about people of Indian origin occupying high offices, whether it is Rishi Sunak or Kamala Harris, not just in politics, but in various spheres. But to talk particularly of politics, we are very enthusiastic about it. And yes, soft power and their familiarity with the cultural context of India does help. But do you think that it also put limitations on their role and how they are approaching India or its interest, because they don't want to be seen as appeasing their homeland or their community? So that also kind of acts like, so example, Trump can clearly show that enthusiasm, but Kamala Harris might have to take a more reserved attitude. So does that kind of act as a limiting factor rather than as a helping hand?
See, I always, this is my own sense. I think we should look at Kamala Harris, Nikki Haley as American politicians. I think I can understand, we all get very happy. We all get very excited. I was very happy when the CEO of Chanel is, Lina Nair. I said, oh, wow, this is an Indian woman heading Chanel. But that's corporate, right? This is politics. And I think it would be a huge mistake if tomorrow Kamala Harris becomes the president and we see her as anything other than a 100% American president who will look out for the American interests. She will do what is right for America. India is not going to be on her priority list, and we don't like saying that, but India is not her priority list. Yes, her mother came from India. She used to come to Chennai for her holidays. All that is fine. But she elected would be the president of the United States of America. And I think I don't see her, or if Trump becomes the president and it is expected that Nikki Haley might get some important post in the administration, I don't see either of these ladies, or Usha Vance if she's the vice president's wife, any of them making an appeasement or trying to reach out to India beyond what is, I think, the bare minimum. Because they represent, at the end of the day, it will be the office of the President of the US, the wife of the US President, and in whatever position, their American identity, I think, will be way stronger. And I think we should tone down our expectations. I think it's a little childish to get excited that, oh, look, she's American. She has a heritage, but she's totally American today.
I think there was a lot of enthusiasm earlier, but it has sort of toned down because there has been some bitterness lately with the US's stance on like the political events occurring in India. So yeah, maybe we are not as enthusiastic, but thank you so much for joining us today and giving us your valuable time and this very enlightening conversation.
Thank you.